Hey everyone, welcome to the StoryMaking show. I'm Jim Woods and I'm here with Tammy Helfrich. Hey
Hi,
Tammy.
Jim. Hey, thanks
Tammy
for
is
having
an
me.
You bet, my pleasure. Tammy is an author, a speaker, and a coach, and she's written 3 books so far. Today I want to talk a little bit more about her fourth book coming out, Unapologetic, but her other books are Becoming a Life Changer, Right Where You Are, which is an encouragement journal, and then the Intention Journal. So, Tammy, this is your fourth book. That's pretty exciting. How does this feel?
Yeah, well, it feels great. And actually, it's a little bit of a misnomer. So the first one was an ebook, the other two are journals, and then this is like my actual first real book. So, but it is kind of my fourth book. So,
I think you're being apologetic.
okay. Yeah, so no, it feels good. It's exciting. We're in the final stages, and it's been super fun to go through this.
Now, for someone who's first hearing this, what does it mean to be unapologetic? Like, what's your definition of that?
Yes. So my definition of being unapologetic is basically understanding who you are, owning it, and no longer apologizing for it. And so part of the issue is that many of us don't know who we are and we don't own it. And so then we constantly apologize for who we are, what we do, what we love, how we show up in the world. And so this book is all about helping you to figure that out, to figure out who you are, to own the pieces of you that make you you, and then to no longer apologize for it.
When you say apologize, can you give an example? Because I think that, like most people, when you hear apologize, it's like, oh, when you say you're sorry for something, you wronged someone, you made a mistake or something like that. What do you mean by just apologizing?
Yeah. So a great example would be maybe you're a little bit quirky and you like unique things, but other people don't like that. And so maybe they've made fun of you about that, or maybe they've told you that you shouldn't like those things. So, like, the first thing that comes to mind is Comic Con, right? Like, there's people who love to dress up and to be, do costumes and all that kind of stuff. And there's some people who don't understand that at all, who are like, what are you doing? That's crazy. Why are you doing that? And so a lot of people will apologize for it and will just say, yeah, it's no big deal. And I don't really like it. Or, they come up with some kind of excuse or some kind of like reason to apologize for something that they love. And so this book is just about saying, like, if that's what you love, own it and love it and stop telling people that you're sorry because that's what you like. That's like a silly example, but I mean, a probably realistic one.
I love that example though, because we all have different hobbies and interests, and some of us, like to quote unquote geek out on different things, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
that's cool. Um,
Yeah.
I love your example though. That's fantastic. Now,
Yeah.
okay, so that's like if you're doing something and it's a little different, you might
Mm-hmm.
apologize for it. Like I'm a total guitar nerd. I admit it. I love like nostalgia and 90s and all these older things. And I like my kids will pick on me like, Dad, you're old. You're bound to hear that from your kids at some point or another. What
Yeah.
about when you're like apologizing in different ways? Not for like something fun you do, but like how you approach other people. Like if you're, and I'll be honest, I catch myself doing this. Like if you're saying you're sorry for things that you had no control over whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
trying to think
People
of a
do it
great
all.
example. You have a great example, Tammy. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people do it all the time. Like, I put a post out when I was writing the book and asked people what they apologize for. And the most common answer was everything. Everything. They apologize for not doing something the way someone else thinks they should do it, or they apologize for um, not being thin enough, or they apologize for making someone wait. And I'm not saying, here's the difference. I'm not saying that you shouldn't apologize when you do something that impacts someone else in a not so great way, right? So it's not about being a jerk, and it's not about just going around and doing whatever you want. It's about owning who you are. So like another good example would be there for a long time, lots of people have said, like, you have to get up at 5 a.m. and you have to, do your side hustle or whatever it is that you love. And if you don't do that, that means you're unproductive, right? And so lots of people would apologize for that and say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I just can't get up at 5. I know I should. I know that's what they say I should do, right? Versus owning what works for you, because you might be a night owl and you might be more productive and you might be more creative in the evening. So why are you apologizing for the fact that you're not getting up at 5 a.m., right? That's another good example.
In terms of stories, when you throw apologizing for everything in the context of like making stories or even the stories we tell ourselves, it throws everything in a spin. You're apologizing, for the art you're making, for what you're doing, for the work you do, for everything, like you mentioned earlier, for apologizing for everything, because the story it can almost become a I'm not worthy. I don't matter. It really can go very extreme when you just start apologizing for everything.
Right.
And that's something you've taught me over the years, especially when you're saying I'm sorry, or, ooh, sorry I didn't put out a podcast. My kids were sick or something like that. I don't know if you really truly need to apologize for that.
Right.
Because, as a parent, that's very, very important to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so much of it is that we have just taken on other people's expectations of us. And so that's a lot of the reason why we apologize, because we apologize because we're not doing something in a way that someone else expects us to. Now, if you're in a corporate environment and it's, with your boss, like that's a totally different thing, right? But if it's just, you're just apologizing because you don't do something the way, like a lot of us are dealing with this kind of in these middle life years, like with our parents, right? Because we do things very differently than how our parents do. And so I see this a lot with my clients, and I deal with this myself too. I could end up apologizing all the time because I'm doing something differently. I choose not to, because just because I do it differently doesn't mean that I'm wrong and they're right. But that's where, we always have this like black or white. So many of us live in like a black or white world of there's right or wrong and there's one way to do things. And that's just not simply the case.
When you apologize for everything, I think it becomes almost a habit and you don't notice you're doing it. And how can someone start to realize that they are doing that? Because it's almost like breathing, or you don't know any different. How can you be more aware about that?
Yeah. So awareness is the big thing. That's what I do with a lot of my coaching clients, is just training yourself to start to be aware of those stories you tell yourself. Because a lot of it is, sometimes it's not even about apologizing to other people. It's like constantly apologizing to yourself and beating yourself up because of these old stories that you're telling yourself. So it's just really starting to pay attention. So with you, I think as we've been working on this book, one of the things is you really started to pay attention to, oh my goodness, how many times am I apologizing? That's what I start the book off with. How many times did you apologize today? Do you even know? Or has it become so habitual that you just do it for everything? Which again is I've talked to so many people while writing this book, and that's what they just feel like they have to apologize for everything. And I just don't believe that.
I think paying attention to the words we use is really important. And even if someone bumps into you, Tammy, or into me, Jim, almost automatic reflex, oh, sorry, they bumped into you. And that's just an extreme example. But I feel like we almost do that all the time. And then if you know what I mean? Please expand. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, I'm not saying not apologizing for that. Like if you bumped into someone that's just common courtesy, right? But I think you're right. I think that we take that to the next level, and then we just constantly are apologizing for how we show up in the world, which is just, it makes me really sad, because we just all have so much to bring to the world. But if we're constantly like pulling ourselves down and shrinking back and like always apologizing for just who we are and what we love, it's really hard to bring what you have to bring to the world.
If anyone has any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. I know Tammy is an amazing coach, an insightful, wise coach and writer, and she would love to answer any of your questions. Tammy, all right, they're nodding their head, they're like, yeah, okay, that's me. What would be some of the first steps to kind of breaking that habit and saying, okay, I know I'm apologizing too much. How do I become more unapologetic? How do I become more the me I'm meant to be?
Yeah. So I think you said it. The first one is always awareness. We tend to really discount that, but really starting to pay attention to the words you're talking to yourself, the way that you speak to other people, how many times you say, I'm sorry. I mean, even just like starting to catch yourself saying that would be really helpful. And then asking yourself, did I really need to apologize in that situation? Right. So I think that's a big part. And then so much of this is also like really learning to understand who you are and what you do have to bring to the world. I mean, this is like a lifelong concept for many of us, right? Learning to understand and accept ourselves and realize that we're not broken, and there's not like someone else doesn't have some answer out there that we're all searching for, right? That's a big piece of it. We've kind of all been trained that like someone else has our answer versus getting really honest. So one of the things that I love to do as a coach is provide a really safe space for people to get honest, because I think most of us haven't had that. Most of us have been told how we should act and who we should be. And then if we don't follow those things, then we've been judged for it. And so that is part of the reason why we all then apologize, because we've been judged for doing it. And so a big part of this is just really getting to know yourself in the process.
And that's scary and that's hard, getting to know yourself. It's a lot easier to follow a teacher. It's a lot easier to follow some expert or some guide who says, do this, do this, do this.
Yeah.
And I know firsthand, I mean, I was talking to you yesterday in a coaching call. It's like, you're just kind of asking those questions, and we have to, the clients, the individuals, the readers, we have to do the hard part, the homework. And even before we hopped on, I said, yeah, I realized, like, I think I have a caffeine problem and it's making me anxious. And I said, even before we hopped on this call here to go live, I was like, I had this massive, caffeine headache, and I kind of wrote it out, but there's so much experimentation. And that's something I know you always say, and I smile every time, because it's like, that's the truth. We all need to experiment more. So if you could just talk a little bit about the experimentation process, because I think it's a little scary, especially if you've never really done that much on your own before.
Yeah, I think for so many of us, I mean, again, we just kind of are trained in society and in school and in, if you've been in the corporate environment, that there are like certain ways you should do things and there are certain ways you shouldn't do things. And so this idea of experimentation has kind of been a lost art. I mean, if you think about careers and just even people, long before the Industrial Revolution, that's what they were doing. Like they were always experimenting and figuring out and doing, and then we've all of a sudden gotten into this kind of like systemized way of doing things. So I always say, like, first of all, I will tell my clients, I don't have your answers. I don't. I believe you have I believe Jim has his answers. I believe Tammy has her answers. Now, what I can help you do is dig away and get at some of those things that are covering them up. But that's why a big part of the book is going to be asking you questions. Like, yes, you can read through it, but I really challenge people to actually do this work and to ask themselves these questions, because it allows you to experiment. Like it allows you to try some things, to maybe do some things, that you love to do when you were a kid. Like that's one of the questions that I talk about. What did you love to do when you were a kid? So many of us as adults have forgotten those things that brought us passion. My husband's a great example. I didn't put it in the book, but he loved to ride his bike when he was a kid, and that always brought him joy. And then in his mid-40s, he decided to take it up again and went mountain biking, and was like, it brought him to life. And he wasn't going to be a professional mountain biker, but it brought him joy, and it helped him, come alive and feel who he was. And so it's just things like that. It's experimenting with your rhythms. It's experimenting with, again, like I was talking about the 5 a.m. thing. If you're not, I am an early morning person, so I get a ton done in the early morning. But by mid-afternoon, I'm not doing podcast interviews and I'm not recording podcasts because that's not the best, most creative time, right? So it's just, it's getting to know yourself again. I think, one of the things that I say is, we didn't apologize for ourselves when we were kids. Any of you who have kids or who've been around kids, they rarely apologize for who they are and what they love, right? We learn that. So what I say is that, like, we can unlearn that too. We can learn to be more ourselves and be okay if people don't like it, which is the challenging part sometimes. Yeah.
I know in the book, Unapologetic, you mentioned the Enneagram and how you found it to be a useful tool to learn more about yourself. What are a few things that you've learned using the Enneagram, just yourself? I know it's like sometimes we'll geek out and, even during a client call, we'll both say, well, this is this, or this is a tendency because of the Enneagram. But how has it helped you become more unapologetic?
Yeah. The Enneagram was actually huge for me. So I actually heard about the Enneagram probably 10 years ago from a book by Richard Rohr. And I, kind of dabbled in it a little bit, but it wasn't really maybe until the last, 5 or 6 years that I really started to get into it with Ian Morgan Cron's book, The Road Back to You, which is really, really helpful if you're interested in the Enneagram. So basically it's a personality typing system. I don't like to really call it that. It's basically a way that it's how you see the world. So we're all wired differently. And I think this is, again, something else that is not taught to us because we have been told to do things in certain ways. And so especially in schools, there's not a lot of flexibility for that a lot of the times. So the Enneagram for me, and it's fascinating because, there's lots of tests now for Enneagram. You just take the test and say what you are. Well, it really takes a lot of kind of patience and study because pretty much almost everyone I've talked to rejects their number of who they are the first time because they don't like the negative side that they see and listed about their number. But for me, it was super helpful because I identify as an Enneagram 2, which is a helper. And so one of the patterns that I know over my life has been that, I have always wanted to help people, but I would do it for the wrong reasons, right? I would do it for praise and validation and affirmation. And then when you continue to do that and you're not getting any of that back from anyone, which is often what happens with 2, you get very resentful and frustrated. And so seeing the unhealthy part of how you see the world and the tendencies that you have can be super helpful. And then it was, for my marriage, I would say it was transformative because my husband identifies as a 1. And so once we understood this, a lot of the things that we always thought about were explained because now I see how he sees the world. He sees what's wrong with the world immediately. And I, as a 2, see what's right with the world immediately, right? So we're constantly butting heads with that. And so it's helped him be more unapologetic too of, that's why he's good at what he does because he has those tendencies. Now, it's also helped us be able to see where, the not so great parts of that also can be. But as far as being unapologetic, I think, really understanding that is a gift that I have. I think sometimes I looked at it kind of as a curse because I never felt that reciprocated, right? But it was always because I was attaching something to what I was giving. Wasn't giving from a pure and just really helpful place. I was giving because I wanted something back. I wanted them to say, great job, you're awesome, Tammy, right? Or oh, you're such a great friend or whatever. And so once you understand that and you take away the attachment and then you really are able to give from a very healthy place, it's a totally different experience to be able to just give because you want to give. And so I think as far as the Enneagram, and how it relates to unapologetic is really getting to know yourself and really getting to say, okay, this is what I tend to do when I'm in health, and this is what I tend to do when I'm in unhealth. And so being able to, again, pay attention to that, start to be aware of it and to understand yourself more allows you to be unapologetic and to say, this is who I am. I'm a helper. That's who I am. And so now also, one of the biggest things I probably learned from that was I thought I knew what other people needed better than what they did, because I do have a gift for that, but that could also cross into being very overbearing and to crossing boundaries that weren't mine, right? So like doing things that people didn't really want, but then I thought they should do it, right? So lots and lots of learnings from the Enneagram for sure.
And it's really what you're saying. It was a good guide, but you had to put in all of the work and pay attention to those patterns. Like that last one you said, that was like you eventually said, okay, this keeps happening, and then and I think we all fall into that in some ways. The question is, are we aware of it? Are we doing anything about it? And I think too, I think you tapped into something that's rather universal, seeking validation. And when you're all wanting something from someone or approval, and you're unapologetic, you're not going to get that validation often. You have to be content with your own, hey, this is what I wanted. I'm not doing it for a bunch of other people. I'm doing it for me. Right. And I think that seems a little backwards in some ways. I think we're brought up to really think about others more than ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, I think that has been such a detrimental thing. Now, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't help others and we shouldn't be other focused, but I think it's become, especially if you grew up in a religious environment, it has like flipped to you don't take care of yourself, right? You put everyone else before you. And as a 2, that means you are like a very unhealthy 2, right? And that was my tendency too. I mean, I remember when I first started getting coaching and doing some of this work on myself, I had no idea. Somebody asked me what I wanted. I had no idea. I knew what my husband wanted. I knew what my kids wanted. I knew what my parents wanted, right? Like I knew what everyone else wanted because that was my whole focus. That's what I was told. I was supposed to put everyone else first. And you can do that for a while, but especially as you enter your middle years of life, many of us start to question, has that been the most healthy thing for us to put everyone, and especially moms, like many moms, this is a common thing because then you do get resentful. If you're constantly putting everyone else first and you're not taking care of yourself, really hard to be unapologetic and to even be yourself.
I know for you, recharging, refilling your energy is so crucial. And I mean, it is for everyone, but for you specifically, you do something that just completely fills you up. And it's like, there's like the Tammy before, and then there's the Tammy after. And what is it that fills you up so much for your energy and just your well-being?
Yeah. Well, nature, as you can see, whoops, backwards, like from that picture back there, travel, I will say, like, I didn't do that for a good chunk of my adult life. Like I said, especially when your kids are young, you don't take time for yourself. And, many of us don't. And so what I learned on this journey of learning to understand myself more and learning to be more unapologetic is how important that was for me. I grew up in nature. I was always outside. It was just a part of kind of who I was. Now, I didn't realize that that was so recharging to me and that was so grounding and centering for me. And so being outside is huge, being in the forest, anytime I can get by the ocean, which, living in the Midwest is a little more challenging sometimes. Anytime I can get by water, I like yoga, I like walking, we bike, anything that can be outside. Meditation is super helpful. I like to read sometimes and, just read fiction. Jim's got a good fiction book out right now that I'm reading. But that's a part of learning to know yourself as well, is what are those things? And that's what we were talking about. That's where the experimentation comes in. you have to, if you haven't been doing those things, you kind of have to do a few things and figure out and like pay attention to your body and pay attention to the energy, and is it helpful, and find yourself like when you're just lighting up, and when you're feeling like you're really getting the energy drained out of you.
Right.
Yeah.
I know you've said this before, and I say it too, but it's such an important process of rediscovery.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
those things you did when you were younger, those things that you for some reason, we sometimes push really great things aside.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe life gets in the way, or the pandemic, or there are a million different reasons, and then you almost fall out of those good habits, and then you have to
Yeah.
rediscover. Oh yeah, I like going outside for hikes. I like to ride my bike. I like to go play basketball. I like to do whatever. And then once you start doing it, you're like, why did I ever stop? This brings out the best of me.
Right.
And not apologizing for doing those things.
Right.
Personally, I'll give myself as the guinea pig here. I would not play basketball. I would, go write or work on some client work, and I would feel so depleted, and I wasn't doing any like physical activity other than sitting in front of the computer.
Right.
And I would want to apologize for that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
why am I cranky, irritable, tired? I haven't moved. I haven't moved my body at all. I've been like, bump on a log myself, just staring at a computer screen. And so unplugging has always been really important for me. And
I call it like giving your brain space to breathe, because we have so much coming at us constantly now, right? Just constant input and data and responsibilities and, all of those things. And so giving yourself some time where you can just be still, right? So like that's where meditation can be super helpful if that works for you. Or like I haven't done it in a long time, but I do like to go to like float tanks where you literally like float in salt water, and it's very healing, but it's also very relaxing, right? Mm-hmm. It's why sometimes your best ideas come in the shower, because you're just giving your brain a little bit of space to breathe. Music is another huge one. People get really lost in music, and people forget like how impactful that can be. Even if you're having a tough day at work, and you get out, you get up and you go take a walk and you listen to some great music. It's amazing how quickly that could regenerate you. But only what works for you. Like a great example of this, now that I just say that, is like I like, peaceful and calm music. Although sometimes, like lately, it's funny. Actually, when I was writing this book, a big part of it was like I was listening to like 90s pop music, which was super fun. Like that reminded me of like fun college days, when we didn't have a lot of cares in the world, which was fascinating. But my husband, on the other hand, like he has to listen to like heavy metal to like calm down, and that's not calming to me at all, But that calms him. So it's like, hey, whatever works for you.
That's a great example. That's so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, like some people might like classical, and like classical would put me to sleep.
Yeah.
It's finding what works. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes, and like paying attention to that. Like I said, I found it interesting that I was really drawn to like 90s music while I was writing this book, because it just really put me in the mood. But then sometimes I need like classical, like a cello music is like speaks directly to my soul and like calms me down, And so it's really paying attention to what's helpful for you and what's not. That's a question that I ask my clients a lot. Like, is this thought that you're thinking helpful? Is the way that you're feeling helpful? Like I have a lot of clients who, a lot of people struggle with guilt and like constantly feeling guilty for what they have or who they are, or, whatever the reason. And so I'll simply ask them, like, is that a helpful feeling that you want to feel? Maybe it is. Sometimes guilt can help you to move towards, it's usually not helpful for me, but again, that's where you get to decide what works for you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, any other like just common challenges you see, just this recurring themes that keep kind of popping up, even in your own life, with being unapologetic? I have a feeling that you've got quite a few where these roadblocks are just so common to living an unapologetic life, to just getting that unapologetic mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just the stories that we tell ourselves, right? The old beliefs that maybe we don't even believe that we've taken on from someone else. That you could use it as an example of like, you're supposed to be seen and not heard, or you're supposed to be small and not big and flashy, right? Or you're supposed to just like put other people before you, and because if you don't, that means you're selfish, right? Or this idea of like playing small. A lot of our clients are in that mode of like, you're not supposed to make a big deal about yourself, right? Just to play small, like play it safe, play it small. That's just go to work and do your thing, right? That's where a lot of us were. And that's a lot of the stuff that I'm working through as well. I think that I have done a lot of things in my life, but I feel this like recurring theme of, really being able to stand more in my power, which is the tagline of the book, like learning to stand in your power, can be really frightening, I think, because it can feel vulnerable and it can feel exposing, right? Being unapologetic can feel very exposing because it means when you're unapologetic, it means you're going to be who you are, regardless of what anyone else thinks about it, which that's I would say probably what I spend a lot of my clients, what we spend a lot of time on is getting out of your own head, but then also getting out of other people's heads, because we think we know what people are thinking about us, what they're going to say. And yes, sometimes those are true, but a lot of times they're not. And we spend a lot of mind drama around those.
I love that term, mind drama. I feel like I understand that quite well.
Yeah.
With all those stories you tell yourself and then you're thinking others are having, it's almost like we think we're the puppet master. If I tell this person what they want to hear, that's another way of apologizing, right? Of not speaking your truth, by compromising in that way. And
I won't go ahead.
No, you please.
I think this is so not understood in our society. I mean, look at the last year and a half in particular, the headlines, the things that we argue about, right? And so I want to make the distinction, like, this isn't about being a jerk, right? This is not about saying, screw you, this is who I am, take it or leave it, which unfortunately, that's how a lot of people do come to their stance, right? Which is fine. That's their thing. But it's also learning to understand, like, you can be unapologetic in who you are and what you believe while still allowing someone else to be unapologetic about who they are and what they believe, even if it's drastically different. But this is not modeled well in our society, unfortunately. And especially lately, it has been, it's basically people say you can't do it. And I don't believe that. I believe that I see it in my own life. I see it in my own community. You can have very different opinions and still love each other and still get along and still be unapologetic about what's important to you. But I think we've been told in our society that you can't. And then if you don't, if you don't just come along with what someone else tells you that you should, then that means, you're a jerk or whatever. So it gets a little dicey in that, but I also truly believe that if you understand yourself and you know who you are and you're bringing it from a place of health, that's a very different energy that then allows other people to do that, because then you're not as concerned about what other people are saying or what other people are doing. You're not trying to control them and change them because you're totally okay with who you are, because that's where the difference is. When you're not okay with who you are, you want to control everyone else and you want to change everyone else because you want them to be like you. Like, that was a huge part of the beginning of our marriage. And, even really, I would say until I understood the Enneagram, that is what really helped me see, like, I don't want my husband to change. I don't want him. That's his gift. He literally can't. Like he sees the world totally differently than I do. And that's okay, but that's why we make a good team, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
As you were saying that, Tammy, I was thinking too, it's like, if we're only making like one sentence comments, like online or even in real life, if we're only like if we're not digging deeper and we're just saying, oh, well, this is just wrong, you're an idiot. How, of course, you can't have a conversation with that. You're only dividing. But if you, find some commonalities, find some connecting points, you can get along with a whole lot more people and realize you have so much more in common. But when we make these like blanket generalization statements, like all this political party is wrong, they're all idiots, or all this group is, when we make those kind of comments, it's no wonder we're dividing more. But when we talk to people like one-on-one and actually, converse with kindness, it's you'll start to change your mind really quick.
Yeah, I don't know who said it. I should look it up, but I just love the phrase of like, you can't hate people up close, right? I mean, you just can't. It's really easy to hate people when you say like they're the other, or they're, that you put them out there. But like, if you really come from a place of like wanting to understand and to learn about people, it's really hard to hate. Now, I mean, of course, there's always exceptions to that. But I think it's interesting because this is, I have an 18-year-old son. And, during a lot of the last year and a half, we've had lots of conversations. And, he is very unapologetic about his beliefs. And that's just like a gift of his that he's had. But what we've talked about is exactly what you said. It's totally fine to be unapologetic, but you have to know why. And you have to be able to talk about your ideas from a place of your truth, right? Instead of just hurling insults or like, that's the biggest problem that most people have, is they don't really know why they believe the way that they do. Because if you ever question someone, the easiest thing to do is to just throw back an insult or to just try to stop the conversation, right? So that's why I've been talking to him a lot about like, I'm totally fine with whatever opinion you have, but I want you to own your opinion, right? That's what so much of this is about. And again, we've kind of gotten a little off track, but I think it's really relevant because it's exactly what happens in this world. It's like knowing who you are and knowing what you believe and being unapologetic in that, again, from a place of health and not from a place of screw you, I do what I want, I don't have to listen to anyone. Not from that kind of energy, but from an energy of like, this is who I am and I want to bring that to the world. Like, that's a totally different energy than, hurling insults at other people.
As we wrap up, how does being unapologetic connect with creativity for you? Do you think they kind of go hand in hand? Do you think like, okay, they're both a learning process? It's so relevant as you're, wrapping up this book, as it's going to be out soon. Like, how do you view being unapologetic and being creative? How do you view those two now?
Yeah. Oh, it totally goes hand in hand. So I will give you an example. So as a coach, I'm around a lot of coaches, right? And a lot of coaches who are doing really great things, a lot of coaches who are just doing their own thing. And it's so easy to get wrapped up in what everyone else is doing and to get stuck in comparison mode. I think all of us, if we are creating anything, we can all relate to that, right? We can all get so stuck in comparing ourselves to other people. And I always say comparison stifles creativity. Absolutely. And so to answer your question, I think that in order to be as creative as you've been created to be, and as you start to learn how to bring your gifts to the world, whatever it is that you have, that's how you become unapologetic, right? Like you start to really own and honor the gifts that you've been given. And then you do that in a way that allows other people to do it. So I think it's super important. I know for me, I have to be super intentional about the voices that I listen to and, my feeds, because if I get too wrapped up in that, I am not creating my own things. I'm not creating. And I did that with this book, like too. I I would get wrapped up in what other people are doing. I'm like, no, I need to just stay in my own lane and let my creativity come through, right? Because I do have a different way. Like, yes, there's, people will do very similar things, and it's totally okay, but nobody will ever do it in the way that you do it, as long as you are doing it in an unapologetic way.
Absolutely. That's so great, Tammy. Now, how can someone best connect with you? If they're interested in coaching, or maybe just even, I know you have an amazing podcast. How can they best connect with you?
Yeah, so the best way to connect with me is at tammyhelfrich.com. And you can get my social media there. You can see the podcast. So the podcast is called Intentional Life. And so everything that I talk about, the book, the podcast, it's all about like deciding on purpose, who you want to be, how you want to show up to the world, right? It's being your authentic self and bringing that to the world, because I believe we all have something awesome and amazing to bring to the world, regardless of if it's something as simple as being a mom, or what, not that being a mom is simple, but like whatever it is for you, I believe that we have that. So the best way is just to connect at tammyhelfrich.com, and then you can see my Instagram and podcast and all of that. And the book will be coming out hopefully in mid-August, which we're very excited. And Jim has been a huge part of bringing this to life. So thank you, Jim, for all of your help.
Do you happen to have a copy anywhere nearby?
Yes, I have. I've had it here.
Oh, yes. That looks so good.
Without the big gray line. But yeah, super exciting. Yes. Very exciting. So I'm waiting on my final proof, and we're getting closer. The last minute back and forth is quite the ordeal, but it's all worth it.
It's going to be great. And I can personally vouch for Tammy, having worked with her on this book and having worked with her as my coach for the last few years. She is fantastic. I can't thank you enough for having you on the show here, and for putting your book out into the world, because I know it's going to help a lot of people. It's just so helpful and insightful.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. You've been a huge part of my journey with this book, and again, just being a big supporter. So thank you so much. It's been great.
You bet. Thanks so much for everyone who's watching. And again, I encourage you to follow up with Tammy if you have any questions. I know she'll be so helpful and insightful there. Thanks again for watching. See you later.
Thank you.